Hello and welcome to another episode of Charles Weekly Parti. If you're watching the video right now, you can see that I'm once again not by myself. Michael is back joining us today.
It's good to be back.
So, I have a lot to talk about today, and Michael has a few things on docket too. But before we can get to all that, let's roll the intro. So, I promised that the last 3 episodes of the season would be a little bit different, and now I'm finally getting to reveal the plan for them. So today, I'm doing the top 5 from the year in tech. So what ended up happening was yesterday, I sat down and looked through all of the episodes that I've recorded, which is a considerable amount, but through all of that, I picked out 5 general topics that came back. And when I say general, some a little bit more general than others. And basically the top 5 things that happened in tech this year that caught my attention. If I could only mention 5 things, these are the 5 things I'd mention that happened this year. So, started off in no uncertain terms. I'm going to have to talk about CPUs. So this year's been very interesting. So at the beginning, CPUs, you could sort of get them. They were back in stock, but then that ended up fading out pretty quickly. So I managed to get the CPU that I wanted early January. Worked out great. About a month later, forget it. They could not do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they really kind of shot down in that kind of late winterish, early spring time frames where they really got kind of short on everything. So,
and didn't get any better. And what I will say that ended up happening this year that really made it interesting. AMD and Intel both released new generations of their processors. So early on, I think March timeframe, if my mind serves correctly, AMD made the 5000 series available. And just last month, the Intel 12th generation Alder Lake processors became available. And from the benchmarks that I'd said would be the real determination of how good the processors were, those are showing that the 12th generation of Intel chips, especially if you overclock them, rival AMD chips even up to the Threadripper, although that one was an extreme case where another YouTuber who goes over technology hooked up an actual air conditioner to the Intel processor, which in past generations was something you had to do no matter what, but they did it to try and maximize the CPU's efficiency without having any thermal throttling happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I remember we had talked about this in the last episode I was on about, right, Intel has to get back into the CPU game with the prior generations falling flat on their face compared to AMD. And now we're seeing that, right? Intel's kind of getting back into it, and we're going back to, I don't want to say the old days, but the days a couple years ago where it was like, okay, what do I get? An Intel chip or an AMD chip? And nowadays, especially with some of the pre-builts that you're looking at, the performance difference is it's marginal. And that's from a consumer standpoint, that's what we want to see, right? Because now it's all on, okay, what am I using it for? Is really going to determine whether you want an AMD or an Intel chip. And it's no longer like, AMD flat out, being the better one. And obviously this competition with Intel being back in the game, right? It's going to drive that advancement in the capability. And, of course, all the Intel guys are going to be like, yeah, Intel, right? And I mean, I've always been, I don't want to say always been an Intel guy, but I've always bought Intel just because when I was building my PCs and getting everything, Intel was the chip to get. You know, it was before the whole Ryzen series kind of came out, and AMD really started stepping up everything before Intel fell flat. So interesting to see, and good to see that Intel's back and that now we have that good competition. So
Yeah, that was the big thing, and I guess part of my question for Intel was why they ended up actually releasing the 11th generation and 10th generations, because they did fall flat on their face, and everyone who was able to do benchmarks did them pretty quickly and figured out you're buying overpriced sand.
yeah,
Is what you're doing.
I think what it came down to was the fact that Intel had already developed these processors, and at that point it was like, well, you know, we kind of have to get them out. We're kind of screwed either way, so let's deliver on this product at least, right? We have to get this out and start working on the next generation, right? Because, you know, they've already planned out, you know, once, you know, for example, 12th gen's out now. Well, they've been working on 13, right? And then now they're probably getting the drawing board going. And if not, they've already started work on 14, right? So that's, you know, it's always how it goes in R&D. So that's where it was like, okay, we're going to hammer on 13, but we have to get 11 and 12 out, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and looking at my notes, I'm actually going to do a slight little transition and toss Apple's silicon transition into the mix on the CPU side. Intel was steamed about that whole thing. Mm-hmm. First of all, switching from Intel, so of course Intel's not going to be super thrilled about that aspect. But not only did Apple say, okay, we're switching off Intel, and people are saying, okay, let's see how that's going to work. Their M1 chip beat the tail off of the highest end Intel chip that you could buy. There were people who I saw who had an M1 MacBook Pro that they bought for $1,300, and if aside from the screen size, they said, you know what? This is faster and smoother to work on than the $4,000 MacBook Pro that I bought.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, from all the people that I've talked to that have owned Macs and Apple computers, it's always been that case where, right, an Apple just, I don't want to say blows out a Windows machine, right, running on an AMD or an Intel chip all the time, but there's something about the way that Apple has their Mac set up, right? And this can get into a very technical conversation about Windows architecture and all that stuff, and you know that's a rabbit hole we don't need to go down, but because that would take way too long. But yeah, if you need to get work done smoothly and efficiently, right? Maybe you're a college student, you know, on your finals grind like us, you know, maybe you're a business exec, right, working with spreadsheets all the time. Whatever it is, you really can't go wrong with Mac. You really can't, just because of how smooth and fast they are. Of course, you still have the problems with converting files, running some programs and all that, you know, but that's nothing new. But they're really, really speedy for what they are. So,
yeah, my limitation on Apple has just been A, the price tag, and B, the fact that there are certain programs that I end up needing that are only available on Windows. So for the bang for my buck, I had to choose to go on the Windows side, and I've been okay with that. I used to daily drive a Mac Mini for my personal computer, and while back I was daily driving a MacBook Air. It was on loan to me, but it was a fun daily driver. Because it got what I needed to do done. It's light, easy to carry, no problems. However, once I got to this point, needed to sort of upgrade the equipment, and A, I needed the programs in Windows, and B, for the same cost that I could get a decent Mac, I was able to get a lot more powerful Windows computer. And my primary desktop computer has 64 gigabytes of memory. That was an expensive privilege, but for the roughly $1,000 that was spent on it, for $1,000, I have more memory than you can get on the high. The no, the amount of memory that you could get on the highest level of MacBook Pro, which I think is pretty good, but have to see how things go on that side.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this whole thing shakes out with Apple and this M1, because I think we're really going to see I don't want to say a movement towards Mac and Apple, but this is really going to start shaking things up for that whole portable, laptop usage. It's going to be interesting to see, because I'm probably going to be looking at getting a new laptop here in a year or two, and I'm going to be keeping Apple on my radar now. So we'll see what happens.
The one biggest problem with the transition to Apple Silicon has been the fact that Windows as a boot camp piece stopped working because of the way Apple tied everything together. So trying to get virtual machines to run on them right now is a challenge, and once developers and Apple sort that mess out, if they can get Windows to run on a Mac, Apple will actually I will unquestionably say, because this laptop probably has a couple years left too. So once Apple gets to that point of having either Windows able to run virtually well or as a separate boot partition, either way, if it can run smoothly enough, my next laptop will be a MacBook.
A dual boot Mac machine running Windows is going to be unstoppable. It flat out will. So hopefully they can get it working, because Apple will start dominating that market, and then it's going to be interesting to see how all these other companies look to kind of dethroning Apple at that point, because they'll kind of be king of the world. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, Intel's already, as I mentioned, made a couple of comments.
They're pretty miffed, understandably.
Internal memo: we should not be trailing a consumer products company. Is the words that they used.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was just relatively impressive on the side of things. And I thought the M1 was powerful. And we heard, there's M1X was what they were talking about, possibly seeing a more powerful chip. I think Apple may have been feeding some news to try and build up a little bit of hype, because they had a more powerful chip, but it wasn't the M1X, and then they had two powerful chips, which was complete. When I saw that happen, I almost fell out of my chair.
Yeah.
And the performance on their Max series outperforms their $50 some odd $1,000 maxed out Mac Pro.
Yeah.
To think that if you max it out, it's somewhere in between $4,000 and $8,000. To think that can rival a $50,000 computer, it's unbelievable.
It's crazy. That the power at the hands of consumers is going to be incredible. And for all of us that are kind of in the, in the industry, we can't wait. We're kind of giddy and excited about it. It'll be fun to see what people start doing with those machines.
And creativity will always get a little bit better. And I know my one criticism on Apple's newer line of processors, they've showed them the better processors are bigger, which means for a next generation, which they don't need to worry about for a little while right now, because they're so far, they're almost the leaders of the chip race. If it weren't for the fact that my aforementioned you can't run Windows on a Mac right now, if it weren't for that piece, Apple would be unquestionably in the lead of the chip race. And that was completely, that was unseen 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, never would have imagined that we'd be where we are, but here we are. With Apple kind of tailing ahead, but like you said, we'll see what happens with. Yeah, I really want them to get that whole Windows thing working. Man, that'd be cool.
I think there's one way of working it, but it's not the smoothest experience in the world.
Oh.
So now, the next thing on my list to sort of keep things moving along, GPUs.
You can't talk about CPUs and then leave out GPUs, man.
Well, with with AMD's 5000 Ryzen series, they finally pulled out a couple of stops on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, now that they have that series out, there are finally AMD APU chips. And considering the age of the graphics card that's currently in my computer, I'm almost curious to see if that processor could do a better job than my graphics card.
Yeah,
That would be an interesting feat.
Mm-hmm. And I probably stealing your thunder here, but this is where I'm just gonna roll with it. We're gonna obviously talk about the whole chip shortage and everything still going on, but especially with all of that, it's insane to look at your build that you might have, right? Joe Schmo on the street has X build with a 1070 or a 1060 still running in it, right? I have a 1080, so I'm kind of still fortunate in that piece, but people that are like, okay, I need to think about upgrading my graphics card here, or I want to, for them, it's still crazy, right? The prices are astronomical. Right, like we were talking earlier, I've been looking at some pre-builts for a friend of mine, and if you said anything to anybody 4 or 5 years ago about, oh yeah, I'm gonna get a computer, and I'm looking at pre-builts, you'd be shunned. You just didn't buy pre-builts, right? You parted everything out because it was cheaper. But when you're looking at GPUs now, and they're routinely in the $700 range upward, right, and that's kind of that low end. It's insane, right? You can buy a pre-built. What was I looking at? I was looking at an MSI pre-built, right, straight from the company, with I think it was an AMD chip. Yeah, it was an AMD chip, but running I want to say a 3060 for $1,300. $1,300, and that's a 3060, right? You're getting an AMD chip. I could look it up. The only thing that looked out of kind of order to me was the RAM's a little slow, so you'd have to shell out okay, let's say $100, whatever, right, for some faster RAM to really get that CPU utilization out of it. But $1,300 for a 3060,
you can't get a standalone 3060.
You can get a standalone for that price, right? So you're paying $1,300, right? Just if you need to upgrade a graphics card at this point, shell out $1,300 and get a full PC, right? And then at that point, you just part everything else out and sell it to people, right? You got a friend here that needs a new CPU. Hey, I'll give you, $200 for it. You're gonna make your money back, and by the time you're all said and done selling everything else, right? You're getting the graphics card for about, roughly, we'll say $600,
which is still good.
It's a steal right now. So, it's crazy the way the market's going with the shortage and everything, but honestly, that's kind of nice for the people that don't know a whole lot about computers, right, and the hardware specs and how everything goes together. Is it's really nice for what I'm going to call kind of the amateur, right, trying to get onto the computer scene, and they're like, okay, I want to get a desktop, and I either need it for engineering and CAD, or I want it for gaming, or whatever it is. They can relatively easy read a few articles and then get a pre-built, so I think we're gonna start seeing that, where you get more and more of like the novices into it. So
right. And I know the age-old piece has been with the pre-built, no matter what, you're paying a little bit more than the actual parts cost, and that's due to a couple of factors. One being that if you're a system builder, you're probably going to be getting a bulk order of the parts, so it gets to be cheaper that way. But the other thing is you have to, you do end up having to pay for their labor and work on building it. And I think that's the interesting thing. and I've always recommended, if you're going to go for a custom computer, if you don't know what you're doing, aim for a pre-built.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want something more custom than the pre-built you could find, I said, just give me a heads up, and I can work with you on picking out the parts and building it, because not to scare people off of doing it, but when you go to build a computer, you have to be extremely careful.
You have to be knowledgeable of what you're doing, right? Knowledgeable of the parts that you're getting, how everything goes together, and then obviously when you're setting it up and actually building it, yeah, you have to be careful, and right, and that's the whole reason why you usually have somebody that, like, you get your best friend, like, hey, can you help me build this computer, and that's where that process goes. So
Yeah, and my big thing is, I've mentioned I've gone the AMD route. The fun part is when you're holding the pins. I think the Threadripper is a little bit different, but for all of the regular processors, for an AMD chip, the pins are on the CPU, which means if you're not careful, you can turn, the moment you're holding that little square, and it is, honest to God, a little square.
Mm-hmm.
If you drop that, shock that, or anything else that, or even incorrectly put it into your motherboard, you now have a $300 paperweight.
Mm-hmm. It's a very stressful process.
It's something where you have to be extraordinarily careful, because if you have to know, if you make one mishap, you've just made a very expensive mistake.
Yeah, and you're kind of screwed.
It's not that. You have to hit that careful balance, because you want to be knowledgeable of the damage enough that you don't make the mistake, but you don't want to be so worried about it that you're going to make a mistake.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that too, because and this is from what I know with some of the MSI pre-builts, right? Is that heck, a lot of those come with manufacturer warranties. So if you get the machine, right, 6 months later you got a problem with it, you just call up MSI, and then it's no longer your problem. So it's really nice getting that manufacturer warranty, and then you have something happen, boom, no issue. You send it back.
Yes, that is the biggest selling point on a pre-built, because I did not go down the pre-built route. If I have a problem with my, actually, I'm going to cite this out. I have a problem with my power supply. I don't know if you've been following a lot of the tech hardware stuff, but Gigabyte managed to make a particularly faulty unit. And I just happened to read about that at the right point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And I conveniently discovered, okay, there's an issue. I said, wait a second. Looked up the model number. Same model number.
Same one in your computer.
And looked up the thing with the recall. They said, okay, if your serial number is from here to here, you're eligible for a recall. Of course, they make it very difficult to figure out how to take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
But open up the computer, find the serial number, and there are people who peel off their power supply stickers to make it look better. I've not done that, and especially after this, I will not do that.
No thanks.
Look at the serial number. It's within the range. So I may not have been able to get a graphics card that I really wanted to, but what I have right now runs, and it isn't pulling enough of a drain on the CPU or on the CPU power supply where I'd have to be concerned about the power supply sparking up, which is the fault issue that's happening.
Speaking of GPUs, it's funny, I didn't think to mention this right now. I'm going to look up this article and reference it real quick before I just start spouting information. So this is an article that came out from PC Mag it was November this year, actually, November to the 23rd. So NZXT, as we know, right, company that makes a lot of computer cases, big kind of on the pre-built game. I have a couple NZXT cases that I've been happy with. I'm running one right now. So overall, kind of solid company from my perspective. But they just right, we were talking about the GPU shortage. So one of their newest pre-builts comes with no dedicated graphics card. And I'll just give some quick information about it from this article. Michael Cahn's the author. Again, it's from PC Mag. So it's a $799 computer. So we were around that 800, 850 or so right after all said and done. And what you're getting for it is an AMD 5600G processor, right? The APU that you had mentioned earlier, and you're getting 16 gigs of RAM, you're getting 500 gigs of storage, and a 650-watt power supply. For a computer without a dedicated graphics card, right? That's crazy. That first of all, we're in a shortage where, right, companies are making pre-builts without dedicated cards, but that, right, it's coming with all of that set up. Now, yeah, you could argue that you'll need more storage, but for $800, it's not bad.
Yeah, and you can pick up storage drives afterwards. If you keep your eyes open and you pre-plan out when you're going to need storage, you won't have an issue with it.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I said I've purchased a couple of drives, I try and plan out ahead of time when I'm going to need stuff, although my year-end budget is not as large as I'd like it to be right now. Otherwise, there was a 4 terabyte drive that I would have happily purchased. So this year, for one of the projects that I was doing, I ended up picking up an 8 terabyte hard drive. And if you want the real kicks and giggles, that 8 terabyte hard drive cost the same amount as my 1 terabyte SSD. But once again, I did a lot of price shopping, so I kept my eyes open. I said, okay, here it is. I talked to the person who I was working with on the project. I said, here's what I found. Here's how much it's going to cost, and I think this will actually be quite useful for what we're doing here. And I got the green light to go ahead and pick that up. So storage isn't that expensive.
It really isn't, especially when you're looking at hard drives. And people talk all day about, well, the SSD and the load times, and unless you really need the load time, right? Unless you're a streamer, right, looking to you're playing the competitive scene in like CS:GO or R6, right? Yeah, the SSD is nice, but you don't need it. The amount of storage you can get for the same price point of a 1 terabyte SSD, like you said, right? 8 terabytes.
Eight times the storage.
Right, that's crazy. I think anybody would take that in a heartbeat. Yeah, that's insane. So.
Yeah, and my recommendation, especially now that it's in the holiday season, now is going to be when everyone's competing still on deals, because we know last minute shopping's a thing. Some people are going to try and say, yeah, last minute shopping, let's raise the price a little bit. And other people are going to say, last minute shopping, let's be a little bit competitive, because if we have the lowest price, people are going to come to us. So now is the time to keep your eyes open for buying storage. If you're getting hard drives, whether they're external or internal, my target price for buying them is $20 a terabyte. So that's the price where I will purchase it. If it's more than that, I hold off. Obviously, that limits me to higher capacity drives, just because if you try and get a 1 terabyte drive, you have to pay for the enclosure and everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
So that one, I think my first ever external hard drive was a 1 terabyte drive. I actually got that as a Christmas gift. And that held me for a little bit. I now have so much storage it is not even funny.
Mm-hmm.
I think the total amount of computing storage that I have is over 21 terabytes, which that sounds like a lot to the average person.
It's really
but
not.
It isn't, and I'm not going to lie here. Having the podcast takes up storage space, and I think I've calculated it down to costing maybe a few cents a gigabyte. But even though it is a few cents, does eventually add up, and always gets time to be, okay, I'm running out of storage. I built my computer at the beginning of the year, had a 1 terabyte SSD and a 2 terabyte hard drive for backups. Everything that I've done on my cameras have been backed up to that external, or to that secondary hard drive. That was a 2 terabyte drive. It now has about 500 gigabytes free on it.
Yeah.
So I know next year I'm going to have to make a slight drive purchase, which I'm not looking forward to. But anyway, and I know that was supposed to be a topic of GPUs, but I think it sparked a lot broader of a conversation, a lot of important topics.
It all kind of goes together, right? With the whole right GPU. What we're seeing now is you're not buying a GPU by itself. Yeah, with everything that's going on, you're buying it with a dedicated system, and that's just kind of the place we're at. So, and 9 times out of 10, when you get a pre-built, you're going to need to buy storage. So that's just how it goes.
Yeah, storage is cheap.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of things that are now coming on pre-builts, don't know if you're ready to roll to the next topic, but I think we've kind of beaten GPUs to death a little bit. So speaking of things that are now coming with pre-builts, we've got the brand new, right? New and improved Windows 11.
Windows 11 is definitely been an interesting thing. I'm torn between upgrading or not. Right now I have a lot of work coming up, but I think over the break I'm probably going to take the leap, make the jump after doing a little bit of tweaking. I found out when I was doing with that storage upgrade. I don't know if Windows 11 does it, but I found out Windows 10 has this slight little game of chance that you play when you're first building the computer, and I wish I'd known this ahead of time because I would have done it differently. If you install Windows, or at least Windows 10, on a drive or on a computer that has 2 drives in it, there's, I think, a 1 out of 8 chance it will put the bootloader on the secondary drive. And I found out when I was trying to do a little bit of internal tweaking, when I was trying to back up the computer, and this is why this is going to be such an issue for me to be fixing with a holiday vacation coming up. I have to go, my computer isn't backed up because I have 3 terabytes in that thing. I do not have a drive that I can use to back up. Everything that's on that drive is already backed up. Mm-hmm. I can't create the full system backup with the storage drive that I already have backed up. I don't need that backed up twice onto the same drive. But I tried unplugging that so that I couldn't worry about that. Guess where the bootloader is? I have gotten that lucky, and all of the research I'm doing on it is just that it's dark magic to try and get that. So my thing is, I can't make the Windows 11 jump until I have a backed up computer, because I know, or technology, everything always works on the first time without any issues whatsoever. Never does your data ever get corrupted. And obviously, we know, if you did not pick that up, that was a very heavy dose of sarcasm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you do not have your stuff backed up, it will almost certainly break, not go the way you want. And if you have data corruption and your data is not backed up, you're at the mercy of data recovery. Yeah. And if you can't recover it on your own, you have to decide if it's worthwhile going to someone else.
That's it's the one thing that everybody, right, kind of secretly dreads, right? It's that nightmare that you have like once in a while, right? You get that sinking feeling like, man, wonder what happens if my laptop breaks, right? What do I have on there that I need, right? And strictly speaking from a college student standpoint, this is why, like, every time that I'm working on a final, right, and I'm working on Word and I save it and I'm like, okay, I've made a lot of progress today, right? And I've saved a bunch of times. What do? Close it, open up Google Drive, drag that sucker over, cloud storage, because if God forbid anything happens, it's in the cloud, and that's kind of my first fail safe. But yeah, if you're not having on hand backups, right, to other drives, if you don't have on hand backups to other drives, you're really kind of screwed. You're really at the mercy of, like you said, that data recovery, and being somebody that's done some forensics work. Data recovery is fun, and right, you're also having to find a specialist that knows how to do data recovery, and then inevitably, what does that mean? They're looking at your data, and so you have to be comfortable with that. It's a whole tangled mess. So what it comes down to, back up your data.
Yes, definitely back stuff up. Like I said, my entire system is not backed up. However, the data on it is. So part of that extra drive that I have in there, which if I were to clear off would probably actually make my life a little bit easier. I know you mentioned Google Drive. Personally, I'm a fan of Microsoft's OneDrive service because it just works great with all of the platforms, and I can access it directly from the computer without having to open up a web browser. I tried that with Google Drive. It was a while back, but they had a desktop piece that really just linked to the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have as an arrangement there is my files get stored in both places. So for the file folders that I need on hand, I have those set to automatically offload. So my cloud data is actually backed up to my local disk, and sort of vice versa. Anything I put there gets automatically backed up. So no matter what, if the internet goes out, I have the files I need to work. And if my computer gets bonked, then the stuff that's in that folder set gets, I can recover it very easily. I think coming down to the big part, though, besides the importance of backing up your data before doing an upgrade such as going to Windows 11, Windows 11 has just been plagued with little issues since its start. I know the first thing was we saw Microsoft teasing it, and I mentioned that in a few episodes. They said, by the way, it looks like Microsoft's teasing Windows 11, which was slightly surprising because what did they say when Windows 10 was released? This is the last version of Windows.
Mm-hmm.
However, they realized the same thing that I'm guessing a lot of other people realize, which is as you get more demanding, older computers run a lot slower. I have computers that are running Windows 10 miraculously and quite slowly, I might add, to the point of I press the boot button, I go make myself up some coffee, and then I come back and maybe the computer will be loaded by then.
Mm-hmm.
Those you don't want running. You don't want to keep adding features because the particular computer I mentioned has a very old Intel Core 2 Duo in it and 4 gigabytes of memory. And I could tell you there's no greater dichotomy in life than going from using the 64 gigabytes of RAM and an 8-core processor to
that
4 gigabytes and
something from
Intel
the
Duo.
Stone Age,
Yeah, I think that's a 6-pound laptop that doesn't do a heck of a lot. I like
It's a
the
tough book.
computers a lot better.
It's like one of those
It's
tough
an-
books before tough books were invented.
Yeah. It was one of the ones that I either came with Windows 7 or Vista on it originally.
Oh God. Yikes! Windows Vista. Ooh.
Yeah, and I guess that sort of brings up the curiosity question of Microsoft's had this sort of scheme where they alternate between good and bad versions of Windows.
Mm-hmm.
So my Windows history is not good enough for me to go back and go through every single version, but I can say you had, I don't remember which one came out in which order. I think you had Windows 98, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
Windows Me, which we don't even like to think of.
I don't even think I've heard of it. I'll be honest, but we can skip that one because that obviously doesn't matter.
If Windows Me is just considered such a train wreck that the disks it's printed on are considered a waste of storage space.
Yikes. Okay. Windows 2000 was next, right?
Yeah, that
Which was
fixed things, and that's why I'm not entirely sure of the ordering, because Windows 2000, Windows Me, I think pretty close time frame.
Yeah.
Because next one was Windows XP, which was so far loved it lasted until 2014. I remember.
I was about to say XP was the next
XP
one. Yeah.
XP was good. Mm-hmm. And then we had Vista.
Yeah, which we don't talk about.
And then we had Windows 7, which just got deprecated, I think at the beginning of last year. Now Microsoft is taking more strides to disconnect it from the rest of the universe. So web browsers, I know, are starting to discontinue it, which usually happens within about a year after the company deprecates it. When I say Windows 7 is deprecated, it just means Microsoft is not offering support to it any longer. The computer will still run. It just won't receive their security patches, won't receive feature updates, won't receive bug fixes, that sort of thing. So it'll work, but it may not be the best. And as we know, sometimes legacy computers work best on that. So if you're going to have a computer that you don't connect to the internet and you use for typing up Word documents, I know someone who does that. Doesn't connect the computer to the internet, just uses it for typing, and it runs Windows XP.
There you go. That's all you need, you know.
Because if you're not doing any of the extra stuff, then don't necessarily need to worry about that.
Then obviously we all know what came after 7.
Windows 8. I think that one ties with Windows Me for how bad it was.
Yeah.
Windows 8 was so bad that Microsoft had to release 8.1 and deprecated Windows 8 within maybe a year of its release. They said, here's 8.1. That was the first of their free update of versions to Windows, because there was no start button on the screen. Windows 8 and 8.1 altogether, not a huge fan.
Yeah, makes you wonder how that even passed through bug testing. But anyway, yeah, no. So 8 and 8.1.
It was a prettier UI. I'm not going to lie about that. But the full screen start menu, it's not like I'm not looking at the rest of the screen, but it's sort of just disturbing. So if I accidentally press it, if it's on that one little quadrant of the screen, oops, that's a slight annoyance.
Yeah.
Versus, my entire screen now has start on it.
Yeah.
And then it was not friendly at all for, you have to go to the bottom left corner, but your favorite program's at the almost top right corner.
I was never really a fan of the whole kind of like squares in the start menu. It really looked, you could kind of get I guess I'll say the vibe that they were trying to go with. I think they were trying to have it more kind of futuristic based, right? I think that was definitely a launch point for them looking at like getting into touchscreen. I think that was definitely what they were trying to do, but really kind of botched everything with it and how it all got implemented.
And then Windows 10 just took everything that people liked about Windows 7, everything that people liked about Windows 8.1, because no one liked anything about 8, and combined them into Windows 10.
Which, from everything I've heard, is a pretty good operating system. I've had really no problems with 10.
Right, and it was so good that Microsoft said this is going to be the last version of Windows ever. We're just going to keep updating that. And then they figured out that wasn't actually a good game scheme, because eventually older computers start running out of the capability to run software efficiently. So because of that, I think Microsoft was posed with a choice. They either have to say this version of Windows 10 is not going to work on any device older than this, or we can release make another version of Windows, and then that'll make it a lot easier. So you can say Windows 10 will work on this, Windows 11 will not. Windows 10 20H1 will work on this, Windows 10 20H2 will not.
Yeah,
they switched that like 3 times over the cycle.
Yeah, they really backed themselves into a corner with this one. I mean, the only other The only other thing they could have done, the only other kind of solution would be to just call it with Windows and create a new operating system. Right, but Microsoft's not going to do that because Windows works perfectly fine, right? Windows works for what it needs to be. Why build up a new system from the ground up? And I mean, I talked about this the last episode I was on with the basic architecture having been pretty much predominantly the same since the first Windows OS, right? And, you know, we went into the whole Mac thing about it, but yeah, right, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I know the biggest things with Windows 11, assuming you don't want to dig through the registry, they made everything centered, which I know some people are not thrilled with, but I can see why they did it in the sense of it makes it so that, what's the word for it? It matches the rest of the operating systems, because if you look at a Chromebook, their stuff is centered. Mac, their stuff is sort of centered on the dock, and I think in later versions the dock doesn't move around anymore. I'm not entirely sure, so don't quote me on that. And I think Linux had same sort of thing, where wherever you had the, I don't know whether they called it a taskbar dock or something else entirely, but all the icons in that were centered. My thing though, my complaint on it, is Apple may have it centered, Chromebook may have it centered, but there are certain elements that aren't centered.
Mm-hmm.
Because I find it useful when I'm done for the night, I move my cursor all the way to the bottom left corner, click, and it starts there. I don't even need to think about that. My hand can just do that, and I know what my eyes move to where the screen's going to kick on.
It's muscle memory at this point, right? It's been the same for, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think every Windows OS, right? The shut down button, basically, right? Bottom left of the screen, you know where to go, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, moving that, you know, maybe not the best from the standpoint of a user who's been using Windows their entire life. You know?
Right. It's an interesting thing, and when I do eventually upgrade to Windows 11, and at first it had issues with both Intel and AMD, and then Intel's issues got resolved. AMD's had a 10% performance issue. I said, you know what, that's enough for me to say I'm not upgrading besides the data backup piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has now gotten fixed. I'll double check that before I actually pull the trigger on it, but there are also other secure boot pieces that need to be repaired before I do that.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how things go on that side, but I think Windows 11, for what it is a pretty good UI, and I'm looking forward to being able to use it. And I will say I will give myself some time to sort of adjust to it being in the centered. If I find out that if I say it's really difficult for me to do this, I will go and figure out how to tweak the registry so that it goes to the side.
Mm-hmm.
And full disclosure right now, while it is possible to do that in the registry, if you are just an average computer user, please do not open up that particular component.
Please don't mess with the registry.
That is called one of the areas of Windows where you can press a button and mess up your entire computer.
Yep.
I have done this before. I have learned. Because if you... my thing with the registry is if you have a home version of Windows, you have certain elements that aren't accessible to you, and I like tweaking those elements, which are still possible to be tweaked with, but you need to do it in the registry. If you open up right now, if you open up the registry and you mess with something, you do have the chance of messing up your computer if you do not know exactly what you are doing. That is not the spot that is not like the settings panel where you can click a button, see what happens, and then click revert. In the registry, if you click a button, see what happens, it is either going to work or it's going to immediately cause problems. And best case scenario, you get a blue screen and it figures out how to fix itself. Worst case scenario, you do something to it, your computer will not boot, you need to completely reinstall the operating system. And if you're not, especially with non-removable drives nowadays, like the computer in front of me, non-removable drive,
You kind of
you're going to
bricked it.
need to have you're going to need to have someone who knows what they're doing go in and back up your data.
Yeah.
And if you tell them that you were bonking with the registry ahead of time, they're not going to have a lot of sympathy for you.
Yeah. With that said, I think the biggest takeaway is Windows 11. We're going to see what happens. Looking kind of exciting, new changes, but we'll get used to those. Don't mess with the registry. I think that's the most important note. And I think we've beaten Windows 11 pretty much to death at this point. Wouldn't you say, Charles?
I think we have. I think I have a pretty good picture of what's going on with that. But speaking of pictures, one of the biggest things that happened this year was the Apple picture controversy. Not often does Apple go and say, you know what, we're not going to do what we said we're going to do, but this controversy was so big that they actually did that.
So it's interesting because I have no idea what you're referring to. So if any of you listening and or watching are also clueless like me, please don't be clueless like me. Look at the news, right? See what's going on. But Charles here, I think you're going to explain it for me, aren't you?
I'm going to explain it to you, and
All
then
right.
I want to see what your thoughts are on this because I know I made my thoughts quite clear.
All right, let's hear it.
So, Apple earlier in the year, I don't remember exactly which episode it was, but I talked about this for quite a great deal. So, if you're listening to this again, I apologize. But what Apple did was they said, with the next version of iOS, we're going to start on-device screening images for known instances of child pornography before it gets uploaded. And if you do upload that, it will add a flag to it. Now, that will do nothing on its own. However, if you hit a threshold of, I think it was 30 flags, which get sent discreetly with the image, then it will trigger a manual review. And if you do have actual child pornography on your device, then your iCloud account will get disabled and that'll be reported to the appropriate authorities.
I remember hearing about this now, actually, but keep going because you're doing a good job of explaining it.
So the big outcry on it was that it's happening on your device and automatically, but for things going to iCloud Photo. So if you have your iCloud Photo shut off, which I do because I don't buy storage up there, if you have that shut off, it's not going to scan anything. But for the people that do use it, it's a problem. And my thing on it was, I said it's a both sides problem because yes, Apple's encrypting stuff and holding it on some of their servers, but if you use Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive or their Dropbox is another one, most of the other cloud services will actually perform that exact same scan. You may or may not realize it, but they do actually do that because if you are uploading, the one problem with cloud stuff, if you're uploading child pornography, now that's sitting on Microsoft servers or Apple servers, and they're holding what's essentially illegal content for them to have.
Mm-hmm. In some sense, they become, and liable isn't going to be the best term to use here, but it's the term I'm going to use just because most people get it. Right, we're not delving into the super details of legality and the specific language used, but yeah, at that point, right, they're holding illicit content, right, and investigators that figure that out, the first thing they're going to do is go after the company. So
yeah, what preventative measures could you have taken to make sure that you weren't holding this?
Right, so it's completely reasonable for all these other companies to to have these measures. Anyway, continue because I know you've got more to talk about with it.
Yeah, so the areas of big outcry were one, that it's happening on your device, which Apple said was to happen to make sure, I think part to free up their cloud resources, but also to say, hey, we're doing this. We're not scanning through your device. Your device is doing the scanning on its own, and that it either will or won't flag. Because they did a lot of research. In Apple's defense, they did a lot of research to try and figure out what the best way to implement something like this was. Because Apple's privacy focused, and if their performing that scan in the cloud on your encrypted stuff, that means the keys that it needs to decrypt them need to be on that server, which Apple has said that they don't do.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, how do they do that? How they do the manual review? Probably if you get 30 flags, it will figure out, the device will have some way of communicating. Here's how to decrypt them.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what Apple does on that, but I'll leave them to their secrets on that. But the big thing is scanning happening on device, scanning happening for a privacy-focused company who said, whose half of their selling point is privacy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're buying an iPhone, you're buying it probably for a couple of reasons, but it may not have the greatest camera in the world, may have limitations. Like, I know my favorite iOS versus Android thing is Android, you can move the apps wherever you want. You can have a blank line in the middle of the screen, which I find very useful, and a frustration on Apple's devices. However, Apple's devices, for me, or for my mind, have a longer software support cycle, slightly greater longevity, and then there is that privacy aspect to it, which we know, which I personally find hard to trust some of the other companies on it, because we all know Google, Facebook haven't always been the nicest with their data, and I can tell right away some of them share stuff, and I think I've mentioned Apple doesn't sell your data or advertising pieces. They will buy it or use it. Mm-hmm. I've noticed. Because I have recommendations for certain Apple software that I basically never use, that you would only be able to figure out if you were matching stuff that I was doing on other devices and other accounts.
Yeah. No, it's right. Apple. Let me formulate my thought process here.
It's privacy.
Yeah,
their privacy.
Right, because we're getting to the whole. Right, the whole argument, right? What do, right, and specifically talking about the United States here for a minute, because Apple is a United States founded company, A, and B, the fact that you and I are both United States citizens, right? So when U.S. consumers hear about things, right, or decisions that a company is making that impact privacy, right, immediately there's a response. So for this, right, and Apple's response may be that, oh, we're not doing it, the device is scanning your photos, right? Apple isn't. Well, it's an Apple iPhone. What does that mean? Apple's still scanning just going through all your images, right? That data might not be reported, right? But the fact still stands that they're going through all of that, right? And then the question remains is, what happens to that? Does that get sent anywhere? Does that stay somewhere, right? Is that encrypted? Is that information encrypted, right? What is contained in that information when a photo is taken or uploaded or downloaded, right? There's a million different questions. So that's kind of that first piece, right? The thing that we forget as consumers, right, is that when you start talking about third-party companies, mm-hmm. Let me rephrase. When you start talking about anyone other than the U.S. government, your right to privacy, in a sense, kind of goes out the window, right? First off, right, we've all heard it, or should have heard it, right, in high school, in our government courses, etc. Right, there's no right to privacy in the Constitution. It's implied, right? All the provisions in there, especially the Bill of Rights, are there to somewhat guarantee a right to privacy, right? No quartering of soldiers, no unreasonable searches and seizures, all of that stuff leads to a reasonable expectation of privacy, right? But that's only limiting the U.S. government, right? The Constitution doesn't apply to Apple, to Google, to Facebook, right? Sorry, Meta, right? As we talked about previously. So, right, U.S. consumers get up in arms, but, right, what happens? We're willingly buying these products and using these products, right? For Apple, bold move on their part, right, to come out and say this, that, yeah, we're going to do this, right? important
They didn't try and sneak it by. They said, "Here's what we're going to do," and they actually had sit downs on it.
And you got to applaud them for taking that approach, right? For trying to be transparent, for trying to let their people know. And that's something that you can look at and say, okay, that in my mind, right, it builds upon their credibility as a private focused company. Yes, they made a decision that may not be right 100% in line with this whole privacy focus. However, the way they've gone about it, they've been as transparent as possible about why they're doing it, right? Can we blame a company that wants to, stop the spread of child pornography? No, right? That's a great thing. We would all agree that that's a good thing. But the way they're going about it, right? Because what's in our minds, right? And when we hear about this information, our first reaction is, well, I'm not a pedophile, So why are they trying to search me, right? We look at it through an intrinsic lens to ourselves. So totally understand the outlash, right, of what Apple's doing. I understand. But like you said, right, there's two sides to it. I totally understand if Apple's trying to cover their backs, right? But yeah, you run into that issue, where if the FBI comes knocking, right, on your company's door and you have illicit companies stored on your servers, all right, you're kind of SOL, because what do you as a company, you're going to say, well, it's my users. And the FBI is going to say, okay, they're utilizing your services, right? At the end of the day, it's your responsibility. So Apple's just trying to cover their back, then you see that all the time with companies. The important thing in my mind, right, is that Apple was ahead of the game on this one. They were ahead of they didn't drop the ball. They stayed ahead of it. They were transparent about the process, right? And like you said, Charles, Google, Facebook, all these other companies already do it. We just might not know about it, right? It might not be in the fine print. They might not have come out and said it, but we know, right? Right. And if you really want to go far back, and I'm risking going down the rabbit hole here, right? You had this whole thing with the whole, the San Bernardino case with the whole iPhone and the FBI wanting into that, the whole Snowden thing with, right, the government spying on its own people, right? Privacy's been a huge thing, and it's going to continue to be that way. But, right, companies at the end of the day, they got to watch their backs, right? Because not all their users are your average American citizens that are, right, just trying to go about their day, right, and trying to use this company's services to improve their life. So can I blame Apple? No. They, in my opinion, they were transparent and they did what they needed to do. So
yeah. In full disclosure, when I say scanning images, they went and came up with a whole new protocol for doing it too. So they used what's called image hash. So running a specific thing on the image, basically taking the data of the image and turning it into a string of numbers and letters, running that same thing on known examples of child pornography. And if those two hashes match, then it flags it. To basically say this is not just, it might be, this is almost 99% sure that this is the case. And I think the big outcry was, I know you mentioned about privacy and rights. Apple has said in these exact words, for multiple of their keynotes, here at Apple, we believe privacy is a fundamental human right, end quote.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they used that so frequently, and then this happened, people said, are you guys going back on that? If it's first this, then what's it going to be next?
It's kind of like don't mean to interrupt you, but it's kind of like the whole Google thing where, right, in their, what was it, like their user agreement or whatever it was, right, that one line, don't be evil, right? And then when was it, in 2015? They had the new, I think it was the CEO come on, and then like a couple months later, that line got axed. That line got erased from, I want to say some user agreements, but it was somewhere in like one of their policies, and it got erased, and there was an uproar about it. Never got added back in, but it really begs the question, right? why would you remove that, right? What was the purpose of removing it? And in Apple's case, what's the purpose of saying, right, that we think privacy is a fundamental human right, and then doing something like this, right?
And I think at the end of the day, the last piece was they told people, here's how to turn it off. And at the end of the day, they said, we're not implementing this right now. We're going to sit back down at the table and see if we could figure out a solution. But basically, with all the way put together and why I said ultimately I can't support the system, is because they said, here's how, flip that switch, you're not going to have to worry about it. First and foremost, if I'm going to have any type of illicit material, which I don't,
the first thing you're
not going to ever upload it to the cloud, because that would be unquestionable look here, guess what? I have this stuff I'm not supposed to. I'm going to upload it there.
Yeah, Charles, we get it. You're smarter than the average two-bit criminal.
Yeah. No, but no, the whole point is we're going to tell you we're performing the scan, and we're going to tell you here's how to turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
Which means if you do have illicit content, what do?
You turn it off, right? It's
right.
that easy.
And then all of a sudden, guess whose images are the ones getting scanned?
Mm-hmm.
It's the only thing it's done. If Apple said that they were doing that and actually didn't do that, it might actually probably work for stuff. But altogether, it's just it's...
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's only going to catch people who are so stupid that they don't even... No offense to people in general, but it's only going to catch the people who don't know what the heck they're doing enough that they literally led the breadcrumb chain of evidence. That's all it would do.
Yeah.
Anyone who's worth their salt, they're not going to get caught up with
they're not going to get caught by that. Yep.
So, I think we've flown through that topic well enough.
Yeah, I think that was less of a sprint, but more of like a marathon race, you know.
Speaking of racing, I want to finish it up with one of my favorite things to talk about.
Transition by me.
Yeah, the DJI FPV drone. I mentioned this in one of the first 5 episodes. I want to say, I think it was the second or the third, not entirely sure.
So you would say you've droned on about this topic quite a while, huh?
I droned on about it a lot previously. But this was one of my favorite things, and I saw it at the stage of, we're announcing it, but it's not quite yet available. Now it's at the availability stage. Mm-hmm. I still can't afford it, but
So this FPV drone by DJI, some preliminary, just kind of googling it, looking around. It's looking like your price range is going to be around $1,300 to $1,000. So
assuming you don't add anything on.
Yeah, assuming you don't add any features or buy anything else. So the $1,000 price range, that's coming from just preliminary Google search that was from Amazon, and some other sites that were selling it. The $1,300 number that you've gotten is straight from the website, which probably has some other features, I would assume. Who knows? But I'll let you, since this is your kind of bread and butter little thing you've been excited about for forever, I'll let you talk about it.
This is one of those things, if I won the lottery, I would be responsible with myself, but I am buying a few things for myself. This would be one of them. The ability to drone race, but actually be the drone. Mm-hmm. Previously, the way you worked with drones was you had a controller, you could look at the screen and sort of see what it was seeing. With the FPV drone, it's designed for racing, which usually you only did with something that you built yourself, because the other ones were designed, here, take some pretty pictures. No, the FPV drone, it'll get some pretty pictures, but it'll go fast. But giving you that immersive experience so that you not only feel like you're controlling the drone, you feel like you are the drone. Mm-hmm. And I think that's slightly scary experience. That's the easiest way for humans to... If you wanted to go and sit down and fly across something, let's say, I want to fly across the river. You could do that.
Mm-hmm. This is how to do it.
Go straight across. Obviously, it with a $1,300 drone, you're gonna make sure that the batteries are fully charged ahead of time. But having that just okay, I'm gonna take my drone, fly it places where I couldn't walk, and just be able to experience that as if I were actually flying above it. I could feel like a butterfly. Actually, no, butterflies don't fly quite that fast. Feel like a hawk.
I think a hummingbird is a good assessment because those little things are kind of quick, darting around. I think this is really interesting, kind of looking at the footage too that they were showcasing, like shooting this from the first person perspective. Like you said, right? If you obviously want that ability to kind of like fly and experience that's pretty cool. I think there's going to be I think you're going to see this grow a lot. The whole kind of right where the goggles and stuff like that, right, and get away from more of like the computer screen, because having the computer, it's just another device, right? It's another thing that we have to carry around. This drone, just throw a set of goggles on, right? Now, granted, okay, now you can't keep track of what's going on around you, but that doesn't really matter for this case, right? If you're racing, right, the whole point is the race. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting developments on this, and I think some people you're going to see interested and watch this closely are going to be law enforcement and the military, if they don't already have their own things, right, their own kind of similar developments. I kind of see this almost like a kind of like a Google Glass type thing, right, for the future. You see a lot of the implementation of new technology for a lot of your special ops units. I think this is one of them that you could see and argue being used and having the government look at. It'll be really interesting for that kind of like that ISR piece, that surveillance and stuff like that. But I know it's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, talking way beyond about what this little drone is really for. But I think that's just showcasing how kind of, I guess you could say, revolutionary this kind of step forward is with this drone. So
yeah, you can't run in the halls. Why not fly down the halls?
Right, it's an awesome experience to me, dude.
And now that I'm thinking about it, I could almost provide some other interesting experiences. Imagine doing what do you call it? I know we have some camera technology like take footage from a helicopter, but drones can be a lot smaller to get that same footage and a lot more efficient at doing it. If you have 20, well, I'm thinking. If you look at motor racing, imagine racing a drone next to a car, having that just to be able to sort of fly by. Obviously, there are some implications of being cautious on that. But imagine being able to sort of have someone else controlling it and just experiencing events like various types of events, horse racing even. Just getting to watch it from the perspective of being on that particular point.
Being one of the racers, yeah.
The experiences that can provide are just incredible. And that goes for the whole virtual reality and augmented reality thing. Except in this case, it's reality just experienced differently.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think it brings everything together in the sense that we can, if we put our minds to it, we have a lot of things that we can experience, and who knows? Right now, one of the big problems is that a lot of people can't fly around places. If people all around the world get these and get that sort of immersive experience and then share it, if you have a way of viewing it with goggles, you could experience the other portions of the world without ever leaving your living room.
It's like a virtual kind of tour. Think of like virtual sightseeing, just throw out some random landmarks, like the Eiffel Tower, the Empire State Building, right? Or just going around like New York. That'd be really cool to just kind of whiz by on a racing drone and like kind of be in like the back seater, right? As somebody else is kind of going through and zipping through, and you're just kind of sitting there along for the ride. That's a neat way to experience the city instead of having to, physically go there, and having to pay money for, a cab ticket or for a ride around the city, whatever. That's an interesting way to kind of experience it. So,
And for the price of some of this equipment, you can actually. Some of this equipment is actually cheaper than some vacations you could take. And the fact that you could travel, just think about it, you could travel the world without doing a lot of other stuff. The amount of resources that frees up is astonishing. And I remember a book I read quite a while back about a whole future where everyone has robots and you don't travel the world, but you have, what do you call it? The book was called Eager. I don't remember who the author was, but basically how they went and got they could talk with people in various places, and I think they even managed to transcend a little bit of time, although I don't know if that was done with artificial intelligence or not. But having that ability where you can go to a specialty room in your house. Imagine a future. Everyone has a room in their house that's a VR room. And you sit in that room is where you can travel almost anywhere. You want to go to China today, Italy tomorrow, without having to worry about plane tickets, especially right now, plane tickets, COVID testing, possible travel restrictions, getting stuck somewhere. Instead of having to worry about that whole mess right now, you could just sit there. And if you're not feeling well on one particular day, guess what? You could still do that. You can experience the world. And what I think this drone really helped realize is that now that we're having this sort of equipment, we can take and bring together a lot of experiences that the world has to offer that not everyone can experience and make it so that everyone can experience them. And that's my favorite thing about technology. A lot of people may say, don't like computers, this, that, and the next thing. But really, we're all dependent on them, and our lives there are going to be some experiences that become, go into digital pieces. So you may not, there are some people who do not have the funds to be able to travel to various countries. Having something like this
might open up those possibilities,
Right. And I'm curious to know what you think about having a future where maybe instead of having a living room and having a family room and having a guest room, maybe, or what was it? Not guest room, playroom. Imagine you just switch one room out in your house to make it a VR room, a virtual experience room. Do you think that's the future?
I mean, I think it's possible. It's been talked a lot in books, obviously. The one that comes to mind right away is like Fahrenheit 451. It's mentioned a lot about like the parlor where you sit and watch stuff on like the screens. So honestly, it could be. Is it the future? I don't know, right? It depends on how people pick that up. It depends on how available VR technology is in the coming years to the general public, right? By affordability and, easeability of use and picking up and such. So could happen. I think that the short answer is it's possible. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll be living it if that's the case.
And maybe even if that isn't in everyone's homes, maybe there's a local spot that has. Imagine every library just adds an extra floor of virtual experiences, so that you can maybe have 20 areas where people can go and reserve for an hour and travel wherever they'd like.
Yeah.
Get to experience this, that, and the next thing. Just have a blast. So if you can't get the equipment, you can still use the equipment. But I think, and I know you mentioned Meta before. I think that's part of where they were trying to go. Saying, hey,
it's part of where they're trying to go.
Maybe in the future, instead of sitting in the park playing chess with someone, you have that in front of you. And I think it was Ready Player One movie. I haven't actually seen the movie, but just from the trailer, where you have the suit that gives you sensory feedback, if we're actually able to create that in real life, that could actually bring that whole metaverse thing into being. Where yes, you could play chess, you can reach, it knows that you're reaching for a chess piece, and you feel that chess piece. You could feel it in your hand without it necessarily realizing that it's there. The first real world example that comes to mind. Have you ever used a more recent MacBook, like 2016, even in Best Buy?
No.
Okay.
Haven't messed with one.
Well, if you ever do, when you click the trackpad, if whoever has it will turn it off while it's open. If you try clicking the trackpad while it's off, it's like pressing the table. Nothing happens. Their new ones, there's no play in the trackpad itself. All the click you feel is actually haptic feedback, and I didn't realize that until after I turned the thing off, went to click, and like, wait a second, it feels like I'm clicking on the table. You can actually change how much haptic feedback there is in the settings.
That's wild. That's kind
of
crazy.
I think that's just showing that we're making slow steps, and everyone's making different steps towards what will probably be a combined, there may be a joint effort to create what will end up actually being this sort of metaverse concept.
We'll see.
The whole virtual universe just waiting to be explored. So, but I think that'll do it for today.
At the risk of droning on.
Yep, and it's been interesting. We've talked about CPUs, GPUs. What else? We had Windows 11, the Apple Picture controversy, and then this beautiful drone, and all of the. I think our discussions have shown how these simple topics can bring about so much more, and one thought leads to another. Like, if anyone ever says, "Oh, this is a bad year. I wish this year never existed," no matter what happens, there are flops that happen, like Windows Vista. Right, we mentioned. Windows Vista needed to happen for Windows 7 to happen.
It's all stepping stones, right? It's all part of the bigger picture, and that's the important thing to remember, is that all these little things are just puzzle pieces, and it all fits back together, especially with technology. So, yeah, you can't stay stuck in just one particular place in time, or you'll kind of lose everything else going on. So, yeah, no, it's been an interesting year of tech, as you put it, with everything that's gone in. And, like we said, we bounced around everywhere, right? Yeah. GPUs led to storage and pre-builts, and who thought we were going to be talking about pre-builts? But, that's the state we're in, so.
Yeah, and I think my summary of it is I'm going to guess that was your Parti for the week.
Yeah, that would be kind of my
Parti for the year.
Yeah, my Parti for the year, I guess. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, my Parti is just thinking of, no matter what happens, if something works out great or if something works out badly, every experiment will show us which way we want to go. So it's like looking at, I can go down the left road or the right road. If you go down the left road and you wish you had gone down the right road, well, then you learn next time you go down the right road. And I think that's what's going to, every little bit of evolution, people are going to see, oh, we could do this, this, and this. That's going to, as you said, stepping stones, build up the next generation of technology. Like Fahrenheit 451, screens at that point were a little bit more revolutionary of a topic. And now, what is it? Who doesn't know what a screen is?
Yeah, right. And who doesn't know what, like, virtual meetings are? Talking to people around the world, which, like, again, just using Fahrenheit 451, right? That was a crazy topic. You get to see people, around the world and talk to them in real time, and now it's an everyday occurrence. So
right. I've had conversations with people in other countries almost live time, and almost impossible. You could notice that there was a couple second difference, but getting a response within 3 seconds, amazing.
Revolutionary. It really is.
So, if you did enjoy this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you want to catch the Michael's introduction. He was last on episode 2133. So be sure to check that out if you want to hear more of Michael's wonderful voice.
More of my ramblings, more like, but yeah.
Oh.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and definitely subscribe so you don't miss the last 2 episodes of the season. So I don't know if I've mentioned it to you, but this is one of the last 3 episodes, and doing special features for them. So this one happened to be the top 5 in tech, which I'm sure helps. You sort of have an idea what's coming for the next episode. And while the cat's out of the metaphorical bag, I'll just go ahead and say it. Next episode is going to be the top 5 in architecture from this year. And I think that Caliph House that we mentioned, that we talked about during your episode, is probably going to come back up. But taking the top 5 of what happened with architecture this year is going to come into play. And if you have feedback, questions, comments, be sure to leave a voice message if you go to anchor.fm/CharlesWeeklyParti. And while you're there, you could also listen to any previous episode of the podcast, as well as supporting the podcast, which helps out a lot. We're hoping to get microphones for next season so that the audio will maybe be a little bit better. And if you happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to leave a review. And as per usual, you can normally see the action on YouTube, except for 1 or 2 episodes where I don't have access to a video set, but those are rarities. Altogether, it's been an interesting year in tech, and I think this episode has sort of brought that all together. I know I had top 5 things we wanted to talk about, but that led to all the different things that really ended up happening this year to bring it all together into 1 year in technology, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen next year.
It's going to be good year next year. That's all I know. It's going to be crazy to see what happens.
So, anyway, I think that'll do it for today. You want to close this off?
What do I say? Do I hit him with the That's All folks from Looney Tunes? Is that what I'm doing?
Not quite going there. I don't know if that's trademarked either. So, well, but we made it as a reference, so it's not gonna hurt anything.
Yeah, it's not gonna be too bad. Well,
might want to tell our wonderful video editor, because he only knows the episode's done when it's time to roll the outro.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're the smart guy that knows all that. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, listening to my ramblings and Charles' awesome intellect. And
I think you got it backwards. My ramblings, your intellect.
Column A, column B. But with that, that'll do us for the top 5 of the year in tech and our conversations here talking about everything. So with that, go ahead and roll the outro.